Welcome back. The British Prime Minister is to engage in a series of talks on the Irish backstop in a bid to break the current deadlock over Brexit. The proposal, which Europe has already agreed to, prevents a hard border on the island of Ireland. However, speaking in the House of Commons, Theresa May indicated that the backstop will need to change to win the support of UK politicians.
With regard to the backstop, despite the changes we have previously agreed, there remain two core issues: the fear that we could be trapped in it permanently, and concerns over its potential impact on our union if Northern Ireland is treated differently from the rest of the UK. So I will be talking further this week to colleagues, including in the DUP, to consider how we might meet our obligations to the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland in a way that can command the greatest possible support in the House. And I will then take the conclusions of those discussions back to the EU.
And here's what the leader of the British Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, had to say about Theresa May's new plan on Brexit.
We now understand the Prime Minister is going back to Europe to seek concessions on the backstop. Can I ask the Prime Minister this? What is the difference between legal assurances and concessions? What makes her think that what she tried to renegotiate in December will succeed in January? Mr. Speaker, this really does feel a bit like Groundhog Day.
Joining us with the latest on Brexit and all today's top stories is Kevin Doyle from the Irish Independent. Good morning.
Morning.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's bizarre when you find yourself agreeing wholeheartedly 100% with Jeremy Corbyn. That in itself is a strange day. But, I mean, listening to Mark's intro there on what Theresa May had to say in the House of Commons yesterday, you could literally have been reading that last September, October, November, December, that exact same intro. I'm going to talk to my MPs, I'm going to go back to Brussels. I'm going to look for changes on the backstop. It's just over and over again. And this big idea that she had a plan B has evaporated. There isn't a plan B, it seems, or if there is, she is playing hot and fast with it. I was
asking just before we came on there, Bertie Ahern did a very good interview with Pat Kenny yesterday on News Talk, and giving his analysis of the situation. And look, whether you agree with his politics or not is neither here nor there. They don't come much shrewder in terms of that type of negotiation than Mr Ahern. And he said, in his honest opinion, he said, look, they must have a contingency plan that they've been working on for months, but that they couldn't roll out until the time was right. And he said, now is the time. And last night we saw the reality of the situation is that Theresa May, dogged and persistent and tenacious as she is also utterly bereft of imagination as a politician. And she is really at this stage only interested in preserving the Tory party at the expense of the UK, which is, it's an appalling failure of politics on her part, isn't it?
It is. I mean, a couple of things happened yesterday. One was she again ruled out the idea of a second referendum. She refused to rule out the idea of no deal. And essentially, she cancelled this cross-party consensus that she only announced 4 days ago, that she was going to look for, that she was going to talk to Jeremy Corbyn, she was going to talk to the Liberal Democrats, to others, to try and come up with something that could squeeze through Parliament. She's thrown that away and said, no, I'll go back and try and get my party to agree again. Her party is probably, the House of Commons is divided, but the Conservative Party is probably in itself even more divided. So she really has brought nothing new to the table. And that's kind of worrying for us because, you know, when you see the Polish Foreign Minister yesterday suggesting that maybe the backstop could have a time limit, the longer this goes on, tempers become frayed, people say things that they wouldn't have said up to this point, and we are only 2 months away now, so D-Day is coming, or B-Day as they call it.
Yeah, so plan B really is let's go back and talk to the EU and then bring that back to the Tory Brexiteers and the DUP as well, because they're big players in this. Is there anything that she will get from the EU? What you're writing today about the tensions, what are those tensions, and will they arise to anything that will help Theresa May? Yeah,
there was a lot of surprise yesterday, I think, in Dublin and Brussels when the Polish Foreign Minister put out this idea that there be a 5-year limit on the backstop. Now, we've had that debate, or at least we thought we did, and we thought that had been put to bed. Interestingly, I think he was in a meeting of European foreign ministers with Simon Coveney yesterday. Didn't decide to give him any heads up or any warning that, by the way, I did an interview with a Polish newspaper and here's what I said. So there's some belief that perhaps Poland was put up to that by the UK because there are so many Poles there, but also Poland is having its own problems with Brussels and with Dublin over various issues in the last few months. But there seems to be a sense that it's not a crack. The Germans were out very quick to back the Irish position. Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, backed Simon Coveney very quickly. So no panic buttons on that. But, you know, once you see cracks to appear, it can open up a divide that could turn into something.
Theresa May's unwillingness to extend hands across the aisle. If only in taking a no-deal Brexit off the table. I mean, you can say, well, I'm not going to make that concession to Labour and Jeremy Corbyn. But there's, according to the Times today, there's up to 40 of her members of her government, including Amber Rudd, Andrew Gog, the Justice Secretary. I mean, you're talking about serious heavy hitters saying, if you don't take that off, we cannot vote with you.
Yeah,
that you have to assure us that no matter what happens, we will not leave without a deal, which would be catastrophic for the UK and for us.
Yeah, Amber Rudd, of course, will be seen as an ally of Theresa May, going back a long time through a lot of her troubles. So that in itself is significant, that she's now going against the Prime Minister in this one. I suppose Theresa May is looking at that and saying, the only leverage I have is no deal. If I don't have the threat of no deal hanging over this, what have I got? Because the moment she says we're doing a deal one way or the other, well, the EU closes shop and says, right, well, she's going to have to go with our deal, the one that's already there. And MPs who sit on that side of the fence will do likewise. And the Labour Party will go, OK, well, now let's have a second referendum, because a second referendum is better than this deal you've proposed. And so it opens up a whole new set of events. And she doesn't have the answers. The problem is she doesn't have an alternative to the deal that's on the table.
The backdrop of all of this, as we were talking this morning, is the chaos that we saw in Derry last night. Hijackings, bomb scares, people being evacuated from their homes in pyjamas last night. Is that creating an impact, or is that having any value? Is there any news value in that in Britain at the moment?
Not a huge amount. The British papers are covering it, but if you'll notice, it was on the front, more or less, of all the Irish papers yesterday after the bomb that did explode on Saturday night. And it wasn't on the front of any of the UK papers. Now, I know the Financial Times, I think, had a picture on the front page, but it doesn't have that same impact over there. It barely got a mention in the House of Commons. I suspect when the Dáil convenes today, there'll be plenty of mentions of it. Northern Ireland just doesn't seem to carry the same weight in the UK press as it does here, and that's probably an irony of this whole scenario. But this is a small island, and so when something happens in Derry, it affects people in Donegal and all the area around there. So
is that not part of the reason we're in the mess we are with Brexit, which is that this was never properly on their radar? They just don't get it. They don't get how important this is and how deep the divisions are and how fragile it is up there. On the subject of that, a lot of people would have been saying, who's this new IRA? And I mean, I think we all know that dissident Republicans haven't gone away. We now know that they haven't gone away, and they're also dangerous. But how dangerous and how serious a threat are they?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if it's the new IRA, the real IRA, the continuity IRA. They're effectively all the same bunch of people who are trying to recreate themselves and reinvigorate themselves and kind of attract a new, younger audience. From what the PSNI say, they're not very well organised. They don't have huge resources.
Don't seem to be very bright either.
And they're not very bright in terms of hijacking pizza delivery cars. I mean, it didn't take the PSNI very long to arrest 5 people. Now, I know 4 have subsequently been released. But ultimately, you don't need to be very bright or to be very well organised to kill people. And that the bomb that went off the other night shows that.
There's been a lot of talk that this has nothing to do with Brexit. Will that be any solace to people in Northern Ireland?
Not a huge amount, and it's probably not. Brexit is an opportunity. It's a backdrop. It means it gets on all the front pages. If without this conversation we're having anyway, it may not be as big a deal. But you also have to look at the anniversary, Solhead had begged, start of the War of Independence. Maybe that was an influencing factor. But also the political vacuum in Northern Ireland is always filled by something like this. And it's a long time now since we've had an assembly up there. So that has to be part of that debate as well. Oh,
just very quickly, Kev, before we go, the ambulance strike, the first of what could be a long early new year of discontent.
It's a strange one because I suppose the nurses are due to go on strike at the end of the month, and people know it's about money.
No, they had a meeting yesterday. Didn't come to any conclusions, but apparently there was some glimmer of light which will allow for some conclusions. But this is, it seems to be part of the same thing, but not.
Yeah. I mean, people understand what the nurses want, but
more
in
money,
this,
better conditions.
Exactly, quite straightforward. What you usually strike for. This one is ambulance drivers who want union recognition, and they want the HSE to collect their union subs directly from their pay, which you're kind of going isn't a really great reason to be in a scenario where we're having the Defence Forces carry out ambulance services, which is what's going to happen in large parts of the country.
They want recognition for which union? There's 2 representative bodies for the ambulance drivers, aren't there?
There are.
And now they want a third one.
Yes, and the HSE mostly goes through SIP2, which everybody would know. This is a group called NASRA, NSARA, which is part of the Psychiatric Nurses Association, and they feel that the HSE isn't giving them due respect, so up to 500 ambulance drivers will be off the job today.
Yeah, they did say they will provide life saving if there's threats to people's lives.
Kevin, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Plenty more to come on Ireland AM. We'll be back after this short break.